Hello, and welcome back to the God the Artist podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McCarver, and today we have special guest Tom Cladis. Is that how I say your last name?
Yeah, Cladis. Rhymes with Gladys, except with a C.
Perfect. Awesome.
Hmm.
You have such an interesting life, Tom. I was reading your biography, and there's so many things, I don't even know if I can remember them all, but you've wrestled alligators, you've been a flight attendant, just amazing things. And on top of all of that, you're also now an author.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is incredible.
I like to I like to push the envelope a little bit, live outside the box. I think boxes are very confining. Um, Thomas Edison said, "We only know 1/millionth of 1% of all there is to know." So if we stay within those confines, I mean, it's just like we're very limited. So I've always tried to get outside of that and experience freedom and not let the unknown scare me. Just embrace it instead of fear it.
Wow,
And so
I
it's
think
led
that's
to, yeah, yeah, go
such a
ahead.
positive outlook on life to
Hmm.
just go, I mean, alligators. I don't think I could do that, but yeah, to just
Well, I
go
didn't.
at anything.
Yeah, I was. My very good friends know that I like to push the envelope. I jump out of airplanes. I bungee jump out of hot air balloons. You know. And they said, well, I jump off of cliffs. And they called me one day. I was at my office and said, well, why don't you wrestle alligators? And I said, well, I don't really feel like I need to fly down to Florida to wrestle alligators. And they said, oh, you can do that in Colorado. And I said, uh-oh. So happily, my family wasn't around, so I didn't have to ask permission. They were out of town. And so I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll go down there. So they trained me for about an hour, and then they set me loose. You walk into a pond full of alligators very carefully, and you grab one by the tail. And
Whoa.
the tails are very scaly. I mean, they're not slippery at all. So you can get a good grip on them. And what you do is you have to, that's your only point of leverage because alligators can't pivot. If they, pivot one way, you go the other. If they pivot the other, you go the other way, and eventually they give up. Um, the one I grabbed proved to be pretty salty, and so it was quite a fight. But when an alligator is trying to turn around to bite you, you have a lot of adrenaline to hold on to that tail, and so. I pull the alligator out of the pond. In one motion, you throw the tail between your legs, jump on its back, and grab its jaw like this and pull them back, and they're powerless. And so I did it, and I um, I trained with three other people, and the alligator that I wrestled was, like I said, was pretty salty. I guess is the best way to describe it. They chose not to go in and wrestle the alligators. So the handlers said, there's a crowd here that came to watch people wrestle alligators. They probably came to watch people getting eaten by alligators, but
Oh my
they said,
goodness.
would you mind wrestling some more? And I said, heck no, I'll do a few more. So I wrestled a total of seven alligators. I quit at seven because that's my lucky number. And you see, I have 10 fingers. That means I
Yeah.
passed the test. So
Hey, there you
anyway,
go.
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I'd say you're pretty
Thank you.
fearless. You could do a stunt double James Bond type situation now, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's funny you bring up James Bond. Do we have a second? I want
Yeah,
to
go for it.
digress a little bit. When I was a flight attendant, I met. I don't know if you ever saw the James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. But it
Yeah.
starts out with a sequence where James Bond is in Switzerland. He's skiing down a slope. The bad guys are chasing him, shooting guns at him. He skis off of a cliff. He sheds his skis, and there's a parachute in his backpack. He parachutes down, takes off his jumpsuit. He's in a tuxedo, and he goes in and pursues the latest Bond girl. So on one of my flights, the jump master who was in charge of that scene had has a skydiving school in Oakland, and he invited me. I went on and on how much I'd always wanted to go skydiving, and he invited me to come out to Oakland and he teach me to skydive for free. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. And so I had scheduled, I had 4 days off coming up, and I was going to go home. I was based in Cleveland. I was going to go home to Denver and see my family. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm not going to come home. I'm going to go out to Oakland and learn how to skydive. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, Mom, I'm 22 years old. Uh, you can't tell me what to do anymore. I says, Tommy, she called me Tommy. Tommy, don't go. And it's like, Mom, I'm sorry, but I am going to go. And so we had a little bit of not an argument, but a discussion. But ultimately, I said, I'm not going to come home. I'm going to go. So I'm packing my suitcase, Morgan. And it occurred to me that every time growing up, when I did something my mom told me not to do, um, something bad happened. And I was thinking, I don't want to be jumping out of this airplane and have something go wrong, hurtling to earth, and my last thought being, I should have listened to mom. So, Morgan, I didn't go. I was so upset with myself, with my mom, ultimately with me, because I let this doubt creep into my mind, and it kept me from doing it. And so, when I ultimately finally did go, so get this, it was about 10 years later, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. And I chose not to tell her that I was going to go skydiving because I didn't want to go through this again. And so I just told her I was going to go to a meeting in the morning. And when I came home in the afternoon, she asked me how'd the meeting go. I said, well, actually, I went skydiving. And she was so upset with me, Morgan. It's just like, her name's Doria. I said, Doria, look, I'm fine. I don't have a scratch on me. I didn't want you to worry. She didn't really see it that way. And so she thought I was being a little reckless. But now it's like whenever I do these things, she just shrugs her shoulders, says, fine, just bring some milk on the way home. Stop at the store and get some milk on the way home.
That's so
So
funny.
anyway, yeah,
She's resigned to it.
yeah, she is. And she knows, I mean, she knows nothing's going to happen. I mean, I've done some pretty crazy things. And it's just, I don't want to be ruled by fear. I mean, you know, uh, danger is real, but fear is a choice. And so if you don't give in to your fear, it's like when Peter was walking on water. If you remember that, Jesus called out to him and said, "Peter, come to me." So Peter, who could not swim, stepped out of the boat in the Sea of Galilee and started walking towards Jesus on the water, And then a gust of wind came up and he blinked. He had a moment of doubt. And in that moment of doubt, he fell into the water. And Jesus came and rescued him, put him back in the boat, and said, Peter, why did you doubt me? And that's the thing. Doubt, yeah, you just want to try and live a life free of doubt. And I think there's a real crisis of belief in our society, especially for Christians, when in Matthew 17:20, Jesus said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, nothing will be impossible for you. And I don't think Jesus was a kidder. I think he was being serious, but people profess to believe in him, but they don't believe what he says. I got into a real conversation with one of the archbishops of the Catholic Church, and we were talking about that specific verse in the Bible. And I explained to him what I explained to you, and he said, well, that's not really what Jesus meant. And I thought, uh-oh, that sounds a lot like what the serpent told Adam and Eve in the garden. Did God tell you that you would die if you ate the forbidden fruit? That's not what he meant. And Morgan, that's when the conversation ended. The archbishop didn't like being compared to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, so that was over. But anyway, yeah, that's my whole battle is overcoming doubt and trying to convince people to focus on what they want to happen instead of what might go wrong. Everyone's focused on what could go wrong. Oh, this is dangerous. This is bad. Blah blah blah. Um, I'm going on and on. Is this okay?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's fascinating.
Okay. Well, here's another thing. I don't wear seatbelts, and in Denver, in Colorado, you can't be pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. But if you're speeding, for example, and then the officer sees that you're not wearing a seatbelt, you can get ticketed for that. So yes, I got pulled over for speeding. It was a speed trap, and the policeman came out to me and said, "I noticed you're not wearing a seatbelt." And he said, "Can I ask you why?" And I said, "Do you really want to know?" And he said, "Yes." Big mistake. And I said, "Because it's against my philosophy." And I asked him rhetorically, "Why do people wear seatbelts?" Well, because they're afraid of getting in an accident. And it's just like, I don't want to put it out to the universe that I'm worried about getting in an accident, because the second you worry about that doubt, it materializes. And so he just kind of shook his head, and he didn't give me a ticket. He said, he smiled and said, "Just slow down," and walked away. But
Oh my goodness.
another
I'm sure you
another
baffled
uh,
him.
I did, and he has a story to tell, like I have a story to tell. You wouldn't believe this one guy what he told me, but I've been asked to lecture in schools a lot, and whenever I go into schools, I bring a 10 feet long piece of 2x4, a board, and I put it on the floor, and I ask the students to walk across the board. And they think it's the silliest thing in the world to do. I said, "Just do it." And so they walk across the board. They prove to me how easy it is. Um, some of them run, some of them go backwards, some of them skip. And then I say, "Okay, now I'm going to put it across two desks that are, 3 feet high." I said, "Now do it." And again, they show me just how easy it is. I said, "Okay, in Colorado, there's a canyon called the Royal Gorge. It's 1,400 feet. The bridge is 1,400 feet above the ground. I'm going to put this same board across this canyon. Now I want you to walk across it." And they said, "No." And I said, "Why? You just showed me. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. Why won't you do it?" "Well, we might fall." I said, "Oh, look what's happened. You've changed your focus from focusing on the easiest thing in the world to do to danger, and you can't take a step forward." And so, that's another example of allowing your fears to kind of imprison you. And so I try to, and that's what my book is about, The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. That's the title. It comes from another verse in the Bible, Luke 10:19, where Jesus says, "I have given you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall ever hurt you." And again, those who believe in Jesus and God, but they don't believe what they say, and I take them very seriously. And so in this book, there's two teenagers, Jimmy and Sasha, and I use teenagers. It's a young adult genre, because I think, and the biggest readership of young adult genre are adults, and I think it's because when you get to be an adult, you kind of get bogged down with the responsibilities of adulthood and the constraints of adulthood, and you kind of lose. When you're a teenager, you think you're invincible, you can do anything. You're always searching, exploring, and pushing the envelope, and then you kind of drop anchor. And I think it's a chance for adults to live vicariously through these teenagers who they meet a mysterious fortune teller, and the fortune teller encourages them, challenges them to see the world not as it is, but as it should be. And that sets them off on an epic adventure through time, through parallel universes, trying to discover the world as it should be. But there's forces of evil who do not want them to discover the world as it should be, because the world as it should be means we have authority over evil, and they don't want that to happen. So it's a big race to see who's going to win, and there's a surprising climax at the end. But again, I'm trying to communicate. We have to change our thinking, and um, remove these barriers, these doubts from our minds, and then we can embrace the life and the living that God intended for us.
Wow, that is so interesting. So, how did you decide to write a book?
It started when I was a flight attendant. Now, I know it's going to be hard for some of your listeners to understand that there was a world before the internet and the World Wide Web, and so we were writing letters a lot. And I was traveling all over the world, meeting some very interesting people and having some amazing experiences. And I was always writing letters to my family and friends. And, Morgan, I would embellish them just a little bit just to make them fun, And they enjoyed receiving my letters, and I enjoyed writing them. And then I won a short story contest or my short story was called Everything You Wanted to Know About Flying But Were Afraid to Ask. And that was very encouraging. When I was in college, a young philosophy student sat down to me at lunch and asked me um, what I wanted to get out of life, and it's like, oh, I only had like 5 minutes to eat lunch. I'm like, oh, jeez. And I thought about it. And it's like somehow I want to um, make people's lives easier or make a positive impact on people's lives. I didn't know at the time how that would manifest, but that was always in the back of my head. And I think I realized through my writing 4 years after college that, oh, this is what I really want to do. And so that's how it started. And once you realize that a career path, then everything kind of fell into place very naturally.
Wow.
And I wrote one nonfiction book. It's called How to Lift Cars Off Your Face and Other Tips for Living Forever. And the title from that book comes from this is a true story. In Hortonville, Wisconsin, there was a young boy named Lance Myers. He was 18 years old. He was working on his car at his girlfriend's house. The car fell off the jack and onto his face, and there was no one around to help him. And he couldn't really call out for help with the car on his face. So he lifted the car off his face and crawled out. And the only thing that happened to him was he got some superficial cuts around his eyes because his glasses broke. And when reporters found out about this, they said, well, Lance, how were you able to lift this car off your face? And he said, because I didn't want to die. So in choosing to live, he subconsciously had to remove this barrier in his mind that he couldn't lift a car. And freed of that barrier, he was able to lift the car. And for example, so he made a choice. And, if he had been, obviously it was a life or death choice, but if he had been walking down the street and I said, hey, Lance, lift that car, he says, I can't lift a car. There's that barrier in your mind. But it's all about getting barriers out of your mind. And so that's what I try and encourage. The first book was nonfiction. This book is fiction. It's all about encouraging people to remove the barriers that they either consciously or subconsciously put in their minds so they can live a limitless life that was intended for us.
Do you have any tips on how we can do that? Of course, without spoiling your books. But how do we remove
Yes.
those barriers?
Well, I think we have to go back to when we were kids. The biggest risk takers in my mind are babies. And when they are first starting to walk, they crawl and they start to walk. And think what happens when they start to walk. They fall a lot. And sometimes they get hurt, but that doesn't stop them. They don't lose sight of wanting to walk. And that's the important thing. We take baby steps and just don't lose sight of our goal or let these negative thoughts creep into our head. Like they could think, oh, I might fall again, but they don't. They learn to walk, they learn to run, and suddenly your name is Roger Bannister. I bring up Roger Bannister because in the early 1950s, scientists said that it was physiologically impossible for the human body to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Now, Roger Bannister chose not to believe the science of the day, the 1 millionth of 1% of all there is to know. And freed of that barrier, he was the first person to defy science and run a mile in less than 4 minutes. And now I think the record is 3 minutes and 42 seconds or something around. Like that. But it's, you have to be careful what you accept, uncritically. Um, Galileo in the 1600s, he challenged the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, it was dogma that the earth was the center of the universe. And he proved to them, no, it's the sun that's the center of the universe. Well, the Catholic Church persecuted him for 10 years and ultimately killed him, but he was right. And it took the Catholic Church 400 years to admit that they were wrong. So it's things like that. I think the most important word in any language is the three-letter word yet. It's not that something is impossible, it just hasn't been done yet. And that leaves your mind open to possibilities. And that's, going back to skydiving, I think the mind is like a parachute. It has to be open to function properly.
Mm.
So, anyway, that's that's a long-winded answering your question.
No, that I think that's really good advice to
Hmm.
just remove those barriers. I'm just
Yeah,
curious
and
now, is
that
there anything you wouldn't do, or are you just set for anything?
I am set for anything. I really am. And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to wrestle alligators. I mean, there's a lot of people who have a fear of public speaking. So just instead of worrying about what you think might go wrong, challenge yourself to think about what might go right and take baby steps. Um, do I don't know, practice on maybe a good friend or a member of a family or something, and take those little baby steps. And the Chinese philosopher said a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Take that single step, and every step you take, eventually you get to at the end of the 1,000 miles, and you've done what you set to accomplish. You just have to, what I tell you, whatever it is, taking a test, giving a speech, asking a boy out, asking a girl out, oh, what if she says no, or what if he says no? He says, don't think about that. Just be very positive, and don't don't let any doubts enter your mind. All the times that I've done these what some people say reckless things is I don't there's never a doubt in my mind that anything is going to go wrong. And so far it's been good.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Oh, but
back to
in terms
your,
of what I would do, the next thing, there's in Serbia, there's a town called Mostar, Mostar, and it's a really cool town. I think 1500s or 1600s, and they have a bridge there. It's called the Mostar Bridge Jump. And if you think about it, when you're done, look it up. That's going to be my next thing.
oh, okay. I was about to ask what your bucket list was.
Hmm. Oh, speaking of bucket lists, um, I always encourage when they talk about bucket lists, I encourage people when you take something off that bucket list, be sure you put something else back on the bucket list because you don't want to run out of things to do. Because theoretically, when you've done everything on your bucket list, you're ready to die, and it's just like, nah,
Yeah.
just keep putting them back on.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Just keep adding challenges as you face them, right?
Absolutely. And those challenges, as you meet them, you'll find that they start to get even. You'll go a little bit further out on the ledge. When I was 42 years old, I was sitting at my desk, and I had already wrestled the alligators. I jumped off. I've done all that, and it's just like I was getting restless, and it's just like I'm thinking to myself, well, now what am I going to do? And it's like, I thought to myself, I've always wanted to do a backflip, a standing backflip. And I thought, you know what? So I called a local gymnastics studio, and I talked to the receptionist, and I explained to her, I'm 42 and I just want someone to teach me how to do a backflip. And I know she thought this old guy is going to come in, he's going to break his neck or have a heart attack trying to do this. But happily, she put me in touch with a coach. His name was Kevin, and Kevin was very open-minded. And he said, "Yeah, come on down. I'll put you through some reps, and we'll see. We'll see where we are." And I was in really really good shape back then, and he said, he put me through a few things. Oh, I can teach this easy. And wouldn't you know, in 15 minutes, I was doing backflips, just standing
Wow.
on the floor and jumping up and doing backflips, landing on my feet. I did 14 of them in a row. He said, keep going, just keep going. And it's just like, after the 14th, I was kind of tired. And so I said, I think that's
That's
good.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said, well, I can teach you more tricks. And I thought, oh, all right. So that began my gymnastics career at 42 years old, and I did it for 11 years. And at 53, then I stopped because my daughter was coming up and she was going to be a cheerleader and she needed a coach. So I said, you can take my time with Kevin. And so anyway, that was fun.
That's amazing.
So I'm always looking for ways to challenge myself. Now my big challenge is the book. It's
Mm.
getting it out there, promoting it, and trying to get my message across to everyone. Because, as I said when I was in college, I want to help people live their best lives and free from limits. All basically all limits are self-imposed. I'm trying to convince them of that and open their minds to that. Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." And
Mm.
let's get rid of can't and just focus on can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. So, what is the element of theology that you have in your book?
The element of theology is, I think, as people are going through it, it's a recreation of Jesus's life in the 21st century.
Mm.
And I take a lot of what events that happened in his life, and I put them in a modern setting. But instead of Jesus going through them, it's Jimmy and Sasha discovering that they too were created in God's image, and when they free their minds from doubt, they can do those things. For example, um, when Jesus did his quote unquote miracle healings, uh, helped the blind man be able to see and the paralytic pick up his bed and carry it home, he never said, I have healed you. He always said, your faith has healed you. And so I'm trying to, that's a theme that's throughout the book is that we are we're trying to access our our partnership with God. We have partnership with God, and our partnership is He will give us access to His authority over all things. That's His part. Our part is to have the faith of a mustard seed, and we have this conduit where we are connected to His authority, and we can do all these things. And there's a number of events. I think as you read through it, it says, "Oh, I remember something like this happening in the Bible." It's like I say, it's really a recreation of His life. But when we have doubt, here you have this conduit that we have access to His authority to all things. When we have doubt, the conduit is broken, and that's I wanted to just repair the conduit. And with the parable of the prodigal son, you know even even when the prodigal son went away from his father and did all these bad things, when he chose to return to his father, he didn't have to prove himself or anything. The moment he turned around to return to his father, the landowner rushed out to greet him and celebrate his return with a great feast. And I think that's Jesus telling us we can change our lives, and God is ready. As God is ready to accept us the minute we turn around to Him, and we can reconnect that conduit and live the life that He intended for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What would you
Mhm.
say the hardest part is when you're translating these classic Bible stories that we know so well into the 21st century?
Mhm. Um, I don't want it to be. Oh, that's a very good question. That's one I haven't been asked before. Thank you. Um, um, I don't want it to be me hitting people over the head with theology. I want it
Hmm.
to flow naturally. Like um, several reviewers have compared my books, this book, The Age of Serpents and Scorpions, with C.S. Lewis's Narnia series, and
Hmm.
where he presents these deep themes of philosophy, faith, and human nature, but weaved through engaging and brilliant storytelling. And so I want people to be engaged with the story, but at the same time, you know, embracing, as Jimmy and Sasha did, discovering along with Jimmy and Sasha what was intended for us, and and say, oh, I this sounds familiar. And so that was the challenge. I didn't want it to be, beating everyone's head over the head with the Bible. I wanted it to be a riveting story, which it is. A lot of people say, it's a longer book, but they started turning they couldn't put it down. And so
Hmm.
yeah, it's well, so that was the biggest challenge. Yeah, just keeping the story in mind, and but still weaving into it without beating everyone over the head with it, these stories from the Bible.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think
Hmm.
we need fiction like that, or I should say Christian
Hmm.
retellings, just like that. Like you said, not forcing it down people's throats, not beating
Hmm.
them over the head with it. So
Yeah,
that's so exciting. I can't wait to read
yeah.
your book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was fun writing it. I'll tell you an interesting story. As writers, you know, when you're writing a book, you start out with a pretty good idea, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and how you want to go. And I found that as I was writing the story, um, it was it was almost an out of body experience for me, where
Mm,
I was in the story, and instead of telling Jimmy and Sasha, the two main characters, what to do, I was following them, and they were making better choices as characters in my book as I was as a writer. So the way I had originally intended the book, it was I just kind of threw it away and followed them, and it was the most natural, synergistic thing, where it's just like, oh my God, these guys are making great choices, and um, I can't tell the ending. I can't even make allusions to it, because it's a real surprise, great ending. But I didn't imagine that, Morgan.
mm,
Jimmy and Sasha took me there, and it's a fun
I
book
love
too.
that.
I mean, they're two teenagers. They're falling in love with each other, and so there's romance weaved into all this suspense and all this other stuff. And it's very readable and very fun,
Oh,
with a good
great.
message. Yeah.
So will we see JB and Sasha again in other books? Do you think this would be a series?
At least one more book, and possibly two. My publisher has asked for a sequel. I wasn't planning on it because,
Wow.
again, I can't tell you how it ends, but it didn't lend itself to. Well, no, I'm not going to say anything about the ending, but yes, there will be a sequel, and possibly a prequel too. It's
Oh, cool.
the characters are just, when I started writing it, I had a publicist for my first book, and I was sharing with her, chapters from this, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you've got to develop this into a full story, because these characters, these are wonderful characters, and you have to go a lot further with this." And so, yes, when I finished the book, I was sorry to say goodbye to Jimmy and Sasha, and so
Hmm.
this is the way I get to keep them alive and keep them going, basically.
Yeah. Did you base them off of anybody specific, like family or friends?
Um, there's there's a lot of me in there just because
Mm,
they're unafraid to take chances, and
mm,
so that's there. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of personal experiences in there. For example, things. Well, I've traveled all over the world. I've met people from every walk of life, all different cultures, and that kind of gives you a basis of characters and characterizations that you'll find in the book. But it's Lenny Bruce, the comedian, said there's a lot of people walking away from church and rediscovering God, and I think we're one of my biggest things is I think we're being led the wrong way by our church leaders. And um, uh, uh, well, first the argument I had with the archbishop, that's not what Jesus meant. How can you say what Jesus meant? That's the Son of God talking. But the fact that when um, when Jesus gave his body and blood for everyone, he didn't exclude anyone. He was, he who did he hang with? He didn't hang with the people who were going to church. He was the tax collectors, the prostitutes, the lepers, the outcasts of society. So he was all about inclusion. But I think you'll find now that these churches, I'm a member of the Greek Orthodox. Eastern Orthodox Church, Catholic Church have the same rules. If you're not a member of the club, you can't receive communion. It's just like that's not what Jesus was about. And so
mm,
these traditions, even though they're traditions, if the traditions are wrong, that means they're being passed along to the future. These wrong conditions, and there's not a lot of people who will challenge them and said, "Oh, that's just the way it is." We had an incident in our church where I was the youth director for our church for 19 years, and there was a family who uh, was big supporters of my program. They were uh, big donors to the church. They supported my programs. We had fireside chats at their house, et cetera, et cetera. The woman, the wife was Greek Orthodox, and her husband was Catholic. And so he was not a member of the church, but still believed in the Trinity and God and Jesus, Son of God. Um, Unfortunately, they were in Mexico on a family vacation. He was swimming in the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. He had a heart attack and he died. And
mm,
tragic, just tragic, Morgan. And when they came back to the U.S., you know, um, the Orthodox Church would not give him a funeral because he was not baptized as an Orthodox Christian, even though he was a Christian. It's
mm.
like, oh my gosh. And I,
Wow.
I put it to the religious. I wrote letters. I think this led to me being asked not to continue as youth director. Um, that if this was Jesus, would he turn away this family in need, this grieving family? Their father just died
Mm,
with three young children. It's just like,
mm,
how can you justify this? And he says, well, if you go back and read the church fathers, well, I'm not going to read anybody. That's wrong. That's just plain wrong. And so I think there's a lot of people who are getting they're coming to the realization that this doesn't make sense, and that's why
mm,
I think that's another reason why this book, The Age of Serpents and Scorpions, resonates. Is Jimmy and Sasha are finding out the way the world is, it doesn't make sense. This is not the way it should be, and I think it's a revelation for people. I think it feels good to have these two, you know, challenging where they have the courage to challenge the world as it is, and it gives readers the courage to do the same thing and say, well, hey, maybe it's okay that I think that this is wrong, or not the way it should be.
mm,
And so there's a lot of that in there too. So it's not just following theological traditions because I think a lot of them are wrong. I mean, it's not to invalidate the whole Trinity or anything like that, but I think there's a lot of personal agendas that have crept into some of the religious leaders, and that's because they were traditions. That's the way it was done. That's the way it's always going to be done, and no one questions it. Jimmy and Sasha
Mm.
question it, and that's me questioning it too.
Yeah, wow. That is powerful, and I think that's so pertinent for today. Like you're saying, no matter what denomination, there's going to be
Hmm.
issues or things
Yeah,
that are not really biblical, but they're, like you said, tradition or expected. And so it's
these
taken
personal
as
agendas.
biblical.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have done so much. I would love to hear what you want your legacy to be.
I would love my legacy to be one of opening people's minds, not to accept things, not to just accept things.
Hmm.
As I said when I was in college, I want to help people live their best lives, limitless living, living outside the box. Um, and not to be and just to encourage them, you know, just because it's scary, um, don't let fear be your choice. You can stay focused when you're walking across that board. Stay focused on the easiest thing it is to do, and that's what I'd like them to be. I want them to remove these barriers in their mind, so if they need to, they can lift a car off their face. If they need
Hmm.
to, they can wrestle an alligator. Whatever they need to do, if they focus on it, they can do it, because that's what was intended for us. So I want to help get us back on the path that God and Jesus intended for us.
Hmm.
That would be a nice legacy.
That would. Well said.
Mm.
And let us know where we can connect with you and where we can buy your
Yes,
book.
thank you. Well, it's available online, Amazon, Goodreads, whatever booksellers there are. It's through Simon and Schuster. You can get it through my website. My website is www.tomcladiswrites.com. That's all one word. TomCladisWrites.com. You can connect with me via email at hello@tomcladiswrites.com, and on Instagram, tomc_writes. And I would welcome all comments, all questions, all debates. I love to have these conversations, because you know, I plug into your energy, you plug into mine, and we elevate ourselves. It's a
Hmm.
synergistic thing. It's always good. And so um, I welcome everyone to get in touch with me if they want to, and certainly get the book, because they'll like it, and it'll open their
Awesome.
minds. It really will.
Perfect. I am so excited. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on the show, and I can't wait to have you on again once you've written that second book.
I would love to be there. Morgan, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Until next time.
Until